There's a chess game, and the ultimate checkmate is, what's a woman?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're coming to with wokeness, and you can identify as a woman, you get to use the female restroom. Like, okay, but what is it?
Yeah.
What's a woman? You know, can a man get pregnant? Yes. Okay, well, what is it? Can a biological male get pregnant? And then people panic and they start. The people that identify as a woman are capable of being pregnant, and people that identify as a male are capable of also being pregnant. Like, what are you saying?
Yeah.
Say, if you identify as a woman, what are you identifying as? Like, that's the documentary, the Matt Walsh documentary.
Exactly.
Which is fucking amazing. And also amazing that no one's reviewing it.
Mm-hmm.
No one's reviewing it. That documentary is fantastic because Matt Walsh and you can only get it on the Daily Wire, I think, which is unfortunate, but I get it. You know, I get it. The Daily Wire produced it. They want people to sign up, and they're creating this alternative platform for content. But that documentary is so good because Matt Walsh simply asks questions, and he does it deadpan.
Yep.
And it's amazing watching these people just like twist reality into some weird fucking contortionist knot. It's like, what are you saying? What is a woman? What does it mean?
Yeah, it's so revealing.
You know, you're marching for women's rights, but what does that mean? So if I decide I'm a woman and I go out, you're marching for me? I'm a woman now.
Right.
You can just say it?
Yeah.
Like, we can't have that. That doesn't make sense. And it doesn't mean you can't have trans people. It doesn't mean that.
Yeah.
You can most certainly...
And it doesn't mean you're against.
Yes. Yeah,
anyone.
You're not denying anyone's existence either. They exist. However, if you want to be pregnant, you must be a biological female. This is science. This is something that we have all studied and looked at and observed, and this is fucking doctrine. It's no getting around it.
Yeah.
If you want to breed, if you want the egg in the womb, you want the whole thing to happen, the uterus, the baby, that's a woman.
Yeah.
Just because you have a fucking beard because you're taking testosterone, you're still a woman.
Yeah.
Like, this is crazy.
And what was so powerful about that documentary was both Matt Walsh's demeanor and, frankly, his respect with whoever he was questioning, and the spectrum of people that he spoke to on this.
Yes. From,
psychiatrists, psychologists, doctors, professors, and even the woman who transitioned hormonal.
It's terrible regret.
Become who was crying on camera.
That's that problem in this country when everyone wants to talk about representation. Here's what's not represented at all in the mainstream media. People that have had a horrible experience having gender transition surgery and regret it deeply.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them. It's not a small amount. It's a lot of people. Yeah. It's not a cut and dry thing. Look, if there was a way where we had some sort of genetic engineering, where, some super advanced form of CRISPR, where I could just decide I want to be a woman now, and then bam, now I have a double X chromosome, I have a vagina, I'm an actual woman, like 100%, not surgery. And here's the other thing, it's like, if you're saying that you identify as a woman, you're a woman, okay, why do you have to get an operation then?
Right.
Why do you have to take hormones?
Right.
Like, why do you have to do all that stuff? And that stuff seems to be where all the problem lies, because that is purely experimental.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to children. Like, we're now finding, when they're talking about hormone blockers, they were saying hormone blockers are reversible and there's no side effects. That's not true at all. They're finding horrific side effects for kids who take those things.
Right.
And we don't have a lot of long-term data. We just don't. That, like, to say that you've never dated anybody who's over 6'5", well, you're tall phobic. Well, that's a ridiculous statement. That doesn't make any sense. To say that you've never dated anybody that weighs more than 300 pounds, you're a mass phobic. That's ridiculous too. Yeah, it's just all of it's stupid. It's all stupid. People telling, but what they're doing is it's a bunch of people that are pushing this idea of being entirely open to all things trans. That you, as a heterosexual person, should not just recognize that this is a woman because they transferred from a male to a female, but recognize, even if they haven't transferred, and recognize them in terms of sexual selection, in terms of a date.
Right.
And that's just fucking stupid. You can decide, right, you're not into certain things. Like, I'm not really into girls with short hair. You can decide that. It's not my thing. I don't like girls with shaved heads. I don't find it attractive. Like a woman can say that too. I don't like guys with creepy mustaches, and nobody gets mad at them.
Right.
But if a man says to certain people, I'm not into chicks with dicks, then that guy's a piece of shit.
What about, there's a thing called sexualism, where you specifically, are not attracted to a particular,
Yes.
I don't like Asian men. I don't like black women, right? You're not supposed to instantiate those sexual preferences. The racial cue is the one that's causing you to either be not attracted to someone. What do you think of that?
Well, there's certainly beautiful people of all race, so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me in terms of the person's selection. Like, if you tell me you've never seen a beautiful black woman, like, you're crazy. Like, you haven't met enough black women. If you tell me you haven't seen a beautiful Asian woman, like, what? Right. What are you saying? Like, there's beautiful people and there's also, you should be allowed to be with whoever you want in terms of not, but why is it's always sex, right? Because, like, obnoxious people. Here's a perfect example. I don't like friends that are loud and get drunk in public. Oh, what are you, drunk phobic? No, I just don't enjoy that.
Right.
So, like, in terms of sexual selection, in terms of dates.
Why that analogy might fail with some of the progressives. You could alter your level of obnoxiousness. You could grow out of your obnoxiousness. Well,
I know some people.
Conceivably, theoretically, right?
I know some people fucked. That's just who they are.
Fair enough. You want to name it?
No.
But your race is a immutable part of you.
Okay, that's a perspective. Yeah. I see that.
I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm not agreeing with it.
Okay, but what about tall versus short?
Right.
You know, what if you're a woman volleyball player and you're 6'3" and you don't want to date a guy who's 5 feet tall? You know, what are you?
By the way, that is one of the biggest for being a very tall woman, because one of the so there's something called assortative mating in evolutionary theory. Assortative mating is basically birds of a feather flock together, right? And that's very much the mechanism drives mate choice, much more than opposites attract. So one of the mating cues that people most assort on is height. So it's not so much that women want guys that are only 6 foot or taller. It's just that the woman wants a guy who's taller than her.
Right.
So if you look at, there is a study I've discussed in the past that looked at something like 720 actual couples, and I think there was only a single one out of the 720 where the woman was taller than the man. Now, once a woman gets to be over a certain height, she's 6'2", 6'3", her potential pool of prospective suitors really shrinks. And so if you have a daughter, you really want to pray that she doesn't get too tall. Boy, are her choices going to be limited, because few women want to date a guy than them.
Yeah, when you're a 6'3", 6'4" woman, that's got to be a tough spot. I mean, you're basically relegated to big athletes or big giant people.
The other place where you get this sort of mating is where you get women who are super educated.
That makes sense.
The exact same thing happens. The more educated a woman gets, the worse her marriage prospects, because the more sophisticated women are, the more they insist on a high status male. And therefore, as I get more educated as a woman, there are just fewer men who are as educated than me. And therefore, I'm doomed to a life of solitude.
That totally makes sense. That totally makes sense, especially considering that men, you know, in general, they get insecure around women who are more successful, and more educated or more intelligent. Like, very rarely are men comfortable with a woman who has to explain things to them.
Absolutely. And by the way, I think, so I have another theory which I'd like to at some point test. Maybe someone will steal it now. So when you have a couple that gets married very young, they are judging one another based on their mate value at 18 or 19, right? So Tony is high school quarterback, and so he's the hot guy, and I'm the leader. And then later, he stagnates. He doesn't go on with his career, whereas I go on and become a physician, the cheerleader. So at 29, there is now a huge inequity between our two mating values on the mating market, right? So when we were both 19, the fact that we had roughly the same mating value made us a very attractive, stable couple.
But Tony to be a fucking loser.
Exactly.
He's a lame duck.
Exactly. So I have a theory that, and I'd like to at some point test it. Maybe some graduate student will write to me saying, I'll work with this on you, Dr. Saad. I have a theory whereby I think that in many cases where people end up divorcing when they married young, it's precisely because that which started as equitable mating values at time t0 turned out to have huge divergence in our trajectory on the mating market. And that puts a huge strain on the marriage, especially when the wife's status is going up. The best way to ensure that the marriage ends is for the status of the woman to keep going up and that of the man to either stagnate or go down. That's going to be doomed.
Makes sense. It makes sense that also, obviously the young marriages are rough because people grow and they don't necessarily grow together.
Right.
You catch people 10 years later and they're oftentimes radically different people.
Right.
But then there's also the thing that women don't seem to, for the most part, respect a man who's not doing as well as them.
Right.
That's a giant issue. Even if the guy's doing okay. Like, say if your guy's making $50,000 a year, that's a very good living. He's out there doing well. But you make 300. You make 300 grand a year, and this fucking loser's over here with his 50 grand. Like, you're kicking ass. You're like some bigwig at some big corporation. Like, that seems to be a real sticking point. And with men, especially if they have a household where they contribute income together, they pile all their income, and the man starts spending the woman's money on stuff. He starts buying stuff. He's got a new fishing rod. Where'd you get that, with your money or my money? It gets weird, right?
And incidentally, so speaking of, say, consumer psychology, stuff that I study, when you're a very rich woman and you go out on a date with her, even though she obviously can afford the dinner and she can afford that you're going to buy her, if you exhibit cues of frugality, cheapness, that's the perfect way to ensure that you want a second date. So it's not so much a question of, it's an old sexist ritual whereby men were wooing women. It really is an honest signal of your commitment to a woman. So the best way, and I get many of these letters where people ask me, "Hey, professor, what are dating advice?" Well, you do have to exhibit generosity when you go out with a woman. Nuptial gift giving. Nuptial gift giving is sort of the fancy term for courtship rituals across animal species. So many species, you have typically the male engaging in some form of courtship gift giving, and depending on the quality of the gift will determine whether the female will mate with you or not. Well, so much of what we do in mating context is exactly that, right? It's the exact same phenomenon repeating itself in the human context, right? Engagement, right? The fact that you're supposed to spend a quarter of your yearly salary on this rock.
Is that really what it is?
Yeah. That's what I don't know if everybody meets it.
Oh, but that's right. It is that, right? It's 3 months.
Exactly.
God, when you say a quarter of the yearly salary, it makes you just go, what in the fuck is wrong with people?
But
that's so much money.
But here's the reason. You ready? It's what's called a Zahavian signal. I don't know if I've ever discussed this in this podcast. Zahavian signal is basically the idea that for a signal to be honest, it has to be costly. Otherwise, everybody could imitate it, right? So think about, for example, rites of passage in different cultures, right? If you want to demonstrate that you're a top warrior, the rite of passage has to be brutal. Otherwise, if it's only, we all have to do 5 sit-ups, then every male could do it. And then the females can't determine the pretenders from the real guys, right? So you have, for example, bullet ant. Do you know that? Right? Sure. You put your hands through, right? I mean, that takes a lot of courage and capacity.
Explain it to people who don't know what we're talking about.
So this is a tribe in the Amazon whereby you take, the bullet ant is supposedly the biggest purveyor of pain that is humanly possible that you could experience.
My friend Steve got stung by one.
Did he? And what did
he was in Bolivia, I believe, and he got stung and in his heel, got him in the heel.
And
he said it was just he was delirious with pain. Exactly. And he said it lasts for a few hours, then it goes away.
Right. So what they do in this trial is they take a bunch of these ants in the order of a couple of hundred. One is enough to cause you agonizing, impossible, delirious pain. And they sedate them through this and then they interweave them in these gloves, these leaf gloves, so that when they come out of their stupor and you have your hands in there, they start viciously biting you, stinging you. And you're supposed to withstand that pain without screaming. You have to take it in. So you sort of almost go into this religious, for this kind of incantation. Yeah. And you have to do that ritual 20 separate occasions.
Really?
On 20 different times, on different days.
20?
20. before you are admitted into the tribe of warriors, whatever. Well, now let's link it back to the engagement ring, right? If all it takes for me to convince you of my honest intentions is to buy you flour and now let's go back behind the shed and have sex, well, then a lot of cheaters are going to convince you of doing this when they really didn't have good intentions. But if it takes for me to spend a quarter of my salary to convince you that I have honest, so therefore this is a form of what's Zahavian signaling, because Zahavi was a Israeli pathologist that studied this type of behavior, this costly signaling behavior, using Arabian babblers, which is a type of bird. So here's another example of a Zahavian signal. You probably have seen this. When you have a predator that's looking at who to attack, you often will have gazelles starting to actually make themselves conspicuously visible to the predator. They come close to him and they start jumping from him. Have you ever seen this? Do you know?
No.
I think it's called strutting, not strutting. And can you think that would be?
No.
Like, why are they not hiding? Why are they not making themselves inconspicuous? Why are they drawing attention to themselves when there are 50 different gazelles that the predator could be pointing to?
Why?
Well, because what that animal is saying is, the fact that I could stand here in front of you and jump up and down and myself this visible suggests that it's probably a lost cause for you to try to go after me. I'm supit, right? It's a costly signal of my fitness. It's an honest signal, right? The one who is not doing this behavior is the one that you should be paying attention to, right?
Interesting.
So this is called, and so I use this principle of Zahavi signaling to explain things like conspicuous consumption, right? The reason why you buy the fancy car that the other males can't hope to purchase, it's precisely because they can't afford to match your signal. Therefore, it's an honest signal. The reason why I buy $100 million painting that a monkey could have on shows how wealthy I am, that I could waste $100 million.
Ah, that makes sense. It's all just mating stuff.
It's mating and food.
Yeah.
You don't want to become somebody's dinner. You want to find dinner and you want to have sex. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, those signals are so fascinating when we see them in our culture and people get angry at them. Like you see some guy pull up in a Ferrari and you go, look at this fucking loser with his little dick.
Right.
You're like, maybe. Or maybe a guy with a shitload of money wants to let the world know because he likes to fuck. Right?
I've shared actually on the show, I think, the stories about one of my brothers who was a big car collector. 3 Ferraris, Aston Martin Lagunda. And I've even shared a story, which I'm happy to repeat, of we would go to nightclubs where this is the Olympian, this is the 4'3" guy, and we would go to nightclubs and he would pick the most beautiful woman and approach her, even though she's accompanied by a 6'4", tough looking guy. And he had that confidence, I think, because he had that wealth catapulting him. It
certainly helps.
It certainly helps.
Yeah, it's it is a weird, ever prevalent aspect in the communication between men and females is how much money does the man have.
Right.
I mean, and this is one thing that a lot of women hate because they don't want to feel like they can be purchased, and they can't. Some can.
Right.
A lot can. It's a factor. It's a big factor. And a lot of women are very just rabidly, ruthlessly independent. They don't want that ever in their life, and good for them. But the reality is, it's a very effective strategy. You pull up in that Ferrari or that Rolls Royce or whatever the fuck you're driving, and it has a big impact when you get to that nightclub.
And those have been done endlessly in evolutionary psychology. So here's one example. And you don't need to have a signal as big as a Ferrari. Just how you dress in terms of the status that is exhibited. Yeah. So there's a study that was done, I think, in the early 90s, where they manipulated the status, the sartorial, the attire of men and women into one of 3 different types. High status, medium, and some T-shirt or McDonald's uniform, whatever. And then they asked men and women, one of 6 possible, would you go out for coffee with this guy? Would you go out on dinner? Would you have sex with him? Would you marry him? And it's all 6 levels of relationships. The status of the attire of a man had a profound effect on the likelihood of the woman saying yes. Higher the status, the more likely she said yes. That same manipulation on women had 0 effect on men.
Yeah.
And in other words, no man has ever uttered the following words: "My God, you've got a juicy butt, and I'd love to have sex with you, but you're not exhibiting of ambition. Therefore, no sex for you, Linda."
Yeah, that's a reality that people are very uncomfortable with, and I don't think women necessarily are craving the same reaction from men because of their ambition. I don't think women are ever saying, through my ambition, I'm going to get a good man.
Right.
You know, that's just not a factor. But they do say, through my ambition, I'm never going to need a man.
True.
Because look, there's a reality is there's a lot of shitty human beings out there, and some of them have penises.
Right.
And if you're a woman and you run into too many of those, or for whatever reason, because of your environment, because of your behavior, because of the circles you travel in, you're around too many of them.
Right.
There's a large dating pool of shitheads out there. You know, you just say, I don't want this in my life. I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to be like my sister. I want to be independent. But what you're not saying is, I am going to get a baller house and a baller car, and I'm going to get me a man. And the only woman that I know of that I've ever heard say that is disgusting. And the only woman that she's like, you know, talking about her success and how her success allows her to get men. She's a foul beast.
Wow.
Yeah, she's not healthy.
But
looking.
incidental, a lot of women, it's not so much that they're interested. I mean, resources are good only to the extent that they allow you to ascend the social hierarchy, right?
Yes.
This doesn't explain why some women are attracted to the starving artist, right? Because why are so many women romanticizing over the guy with the guitar? Well, that's because they are choosing him based on his future trajectory, right? I am banking on the fact you exhibit enough talent that I suspect that by investing in you, by choosing you, it's going to take me to that trajectory. Yeah. No woman has ever uttered the following words: you have no talent, you exhibit no ambition, you're never going to step out of the basement, let's have sex.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not that women are only interested in money. They're interested in a panoply of cues, all of which relate to the potential of ascending the social hierarchy.
That whole system. You've never been divorced, right? I have. You know, as soon as you enter it, you see right away that the whole thing is stacked against us. And it's just, you look into it if you don't believe me. I mean,
believe you.
You have to basically.
I know many friends
and
divorced.
The mildest divorce. I mean, my ex-wife was as easy on me as you could be. But nonetheless, I ended up paying a lot more child support than she really deserved. And but not a lot. I mean, but it's a lot of men. Oh, in fact, you do have a friend this happened to, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you go into these courtrooms, and it's basically down to a judge.
I have a friend who has to pay alimony for his life.
Yeah.
He was married for 12 years. He's been divorced for 14. He still has to pay his ex-wife. He's married to a new woman. He has a new family. He didn't even have kids with this woman. He has to pay her forever. Yeah. Forever.
Imagine if
till she dies.
Imagine if they had kids.
He fucked her so hard she can't work anymore. Forever.
There's a lot to say about that, but yeah,
crazy law
when there's kids involved,
right?
Forget about
it. That's a very strict law, by the way, because that law is implying that this woman is incapable of making it on her own.
Thank you. By definition, it's anti-feminist.
Yeah. Yes,
it's anti-feminist and it's sexist and it's patriarchal.
Right,
it is totally patriarchal.
Women who they're supporting it because they don't like men. I mean, that literally is what it is.
Who knows? I don't know.
Well, listen, if you're supporting a woman never having to work again because she married a guy for a certain amount of time. Like, relationships come and go. People get tired of each other. People have the right to change. You shouldn't be financially obligated to take care of someone for the rest of their life just because you were married at one point in time. That's crazy.
I completely agree with you.
Especially in today's day and age where my friend is 54, I think he is now. He could live to be 100. Mm-hmm. So what the fuck? He's got to pay for her for another 46 years? That's insanity.
It's phenomenal. Yeah, but again, I agree with you completely. But what you said just then about it being sexist,
it is.
That's a radical concept that hasn't even, I think, registered with most people. And if many people heard it, they would think you are a sexist yourself for saying it. But you know what? It is inescapable that that's what's going on.
Sexism against men is very common.
It's sexism against women, too.
Yeah.
That's what we're also saying.
Right.
And that's the radical part of this, right?
Right?
It's actually patriarchal in the most fundamental sense, which is that the court is saying that the man should be the provider.
I'm going to tell you, there's a woman in Florida who is this is a bit in my act that I'm doing now. It's a true story. There's a woman in Florida who was a cop. She was 25 years old. She pretended to be a high school student. And she's an attractive woman. Made friends with this boy. He thought it was his girlfriend, and she talked him into selling her pot, and then she arrested him. that only works when you have a 17-year-old boy and a 25-year-old woman. If you had a 25-year-old man throwing dick at your 17-year-old daughter, and then he gets her to sell him pot, and then he arrests her, there would be people lining the fucking street with torches to kill that guy. But people are sexist against boys. They feel that boy should just keep it in his pants. That boy should know better. And you know as well as I know, when you're 17 years old, you are a baffled bag of hormones with a boner, just running through the world, trying to figure out what the fuck's going on. And you're 12 months away from being an adult. It's chaos. It's craziness. And to think that this young boy should be able to think clearly in that moment while this 25-year-old woman is manipulating him is insane. But they allowed it, and this kid has a felony on his fucking record right now.
This is the root of the issue with feminism that is current feminism. Its current incarnation. I am a feminist, by the way.
How dare you?
We can define that.
Leave her.
But
how about just being libertarian? Can you do that without?
Well, so
bitch.
well. That's okay. I'm not that either. I'm not an egalitarian, but
you're not?
No. Okay. Too many topics at once.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Jesus Christ.
We go off a lot of branches here.
I know. I love it. Where was I going? Oh, this.
Feminist.
So what you did was you identified, and I think actually I talked about this the first time I was here, which is that this is what's to me at the heart of this is the appalling irony at the heart of contemporary feminism as practiced by self-defined feminists. Okay, many, not all guys. I'm not saying all feminists are like this, but I'd say certainly it's the dominant strain right now, which is that it is at its heart patriarchal, which it treats women as vulnerable, weak, powerless, incapable of making their own way in this world, and it treats men as forget about the men, forget about how they treat men. It's how they treat women that's sexist. It says that they need protection from the state, which is run by usually men. But it's also this other institution, or, college presidents need to protect these women from 19-year-old boys who want to have sex with them. Same thing.
Yeah.
They're constantly calling for women to be protected by these institutions, the state, by men. It is patriarchal and sexist, right at the heart of it. And same thing with family court and divorce law and all that stuff. That's how they get treated. They get treated like they're the ones who need to be taken care of by a man. It's like 1950s sexism. It's like Mad Men sexism. That's what most feminists are calling for now.
Well, I agree when you're talking about child rearing, because I think that child support should be absolutely mandatory, and it's very important. And if a woman is the only one raising the kids on her own, not only does she need the money for food and housing, but also probably for someone to babysit her kids. There's a lot of factors involved.
I totally agree.
And if the man's not in the scene, he owes money for sure. He has a responsibility. And as a father, at the very least, what you should be doing is contributing financially.
I totally agree. I'm not opposed to paying child support.
Alimony. Alimony's weird.
Yeah, that makes no sense at all.
It's weird. Well, I don't think it's a bad thing if someone, say, how about this? Say, let's turn it around. Say you had a wife who was wealthy, and she was taking care of you while you were going through school, and she promised that she was going to fund you all the way through your PhD program. She was going to give you money so you didn't have to worry about anything but your education. And then once you got out, then you guys could share income. But somewhere along the way, she decided she was done with you, and then you're fucked, but you're in the middle of this program that you have to pay for. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that she should give you until you could figure your own system out. So you don't have to quit your PhD program and go get a job somewhere and get an apartment and a car. I don't think that's unreasonable. What's unreasonable is saying that because you guys were together for a certain amount of time, she has to pay you for the rest of your life.
Sure.
That's insanity.
Sure.
And that's current.
I agree.
That's real.
I agree.
That's sexist.
But should that be legally enforced? Should courts be deciding how long the alimony is paid?
No.
That's
crazy.
Well, that's the situation.
Yeah. How has that happened? What's the motivation behind that for the courts to succumb or to give in?
I just explained it to you. It's patriarchy. And the feminists are playing along with it. That's it. It's this idea that women can't make
courts. I mean, isn't the courts aren't there a lot of men involved in those courts? I mean, why are they allowing all this to happen?
And most of them basically like feminists, or at least they are expected to behave and make decisions like feminists. Feminism has become dominant in that way in our culture.
This has been going on for decades.
Yeah, exactly.
These laws have existed like long before feminism was prevalent in our culture.
That's my point. From sexist patriarchy, those laws.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So feminism is basically continuing that stuff in its name.
Piggyback on it and just switching up the definitions.
Let me say really loud and clear, there have always been feminists who hate this stuff as much as you and I do.
Camille Paglia type feminists.
Many of them, okay? And they have been loud and clear about this for a long, long time, and I love them, and they're my heroes, and I've learned from them. I've learned these things from them, okay? But the ones who really are, powerful and dominant in the media, the ones we hear from, the public intellectuals, the academics, government leaders, the people who end up in the White House, Obama's staff in HHS, Health and Human Services, and the Department of Education became very clear to me that all these sexual assault laws and rules that came out of there, they were coming right out of colleges, and they were really of that. They were of the sort of college feminist movement. They were the ones who set that letter in 2011 that made it basically mandatory for colleges to set up these kangaroo courts for sexual assault cases. All the nonsense you and I talked about here a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Anybody could review those or earlier podcasts about your college, about Occidental.
Colleges.
Yeah, but
and, there's a whole backlash now, right? It's all turning back, and I knew it was going to happen.
Right.
Now they're completely being decimated. There's hundreds or maybe even thousands of men who are suing in court, and many of them are winning right now for good reason, because there was no due process.
Right.
Because they weren't allowed to, ask questions.
Well, that poor boy, mattress boy, where that girl put a fucking mattress on her back and dragged it around campus, and then took her graduation speech with a mattress. They went on stage with a mattress. I mean, the whole thing was so fucking crazy.
Oh, yeah. There's this fantastic sex worker activist named Christine Pereira, who's in Vegas. She tweeted something like, when that happened, she said, "Fuck you, mattress girl. For those of us who have really been raped, you're a fucking disgrace."
Ooh.
Off. It was something like that, yeah, and it was...
Yeah, but that girl seemed crazy, that mattress girl.
Yeah, that was an example.
But that boy is suing that school, luckily.
Yeah, they're all suing, and many of them are winning. And I don't know what happened in those cases. I don't even know what happened to Mattress Girl for sure.
For sure.
I know that there's all kinds of evidence that sure looks like it didn't happen the way she said it did, but I don't know for sure, and I never will. We will never know.
You can't know.
But what we do know, for absolute sure, is that there's been terrible or no due process in those cases, right? And so that's the problem. I mean, that basically the accuser gets to win every time. Imagine if that was our legal system writ large, right?
Right.
Joe, you stole $1 million from me yesterday. All right, put him in jail.
Right.
That's basically what's happened.
Exactly. Crazy that even Rolling Stone printed a false rape case, that gang rape case, the UVA case.
Astonishing.
Which is just, how did a company that's been in the journalism business as long as they've been, how did they fuck that up?
Yeah, like that was the turning point, I think, when that came, that it was completely made up. I think since then, it's started to turn. So,
do you think that's good, that things like that happen, that you realize why it's important to have checks and balances, and that it reaffirms this idea of real journalism is important, to have your facts in order, to have checks and double check things, and make sure you know what the fuck you're printing?
I think it's good for society. I think it's terrible for John Doe. All the Joes out there, all those men who were accused and expelled and had their names ruined and their careers ruined, college careers destroyed and all that stuff, right? I think, but yes, your point.
And also, even if you're graded, the emotional turmoil that you go through, there's no way they can reward you for that, or compensate you for that, rather.
So that is part of that whole thing, as I said before, is part of this sort of ironic feminist patriarchy ideology, right? Which is, we need protection. We can't say no to men. We can't stop them by saying no. We need, we need help just there. We need the college president to save us, or the cops, or someone. It's incredible.
Then there's this thing where two people are drinking, and if the two people are drinking, the girl is getting raped.
There you go. Same
Whereas
thing.
the guy's not getting raped.
Because women are incapable of feeling themselves when they're drunk. It's sexist as hell.
Exactly, because the man's drunk too, but it doesn't, somehow or another, it doesn't matter if they're both like sending texts back and forth. Do you have condoms? Like the Occidental case.
It's patriarchal.
Yes.
Men are children. They're daughters who need to be taken care of by dad.
And the sons are men, same age, and they're boys.
And the women are daughters.
Yeah, it is sexist.
So, and this is my second disagreement with Jordan Peterson. He thinks that all the stuff in college campuses that's crazy is because of postmodernism, and he doesn't understand postmodernism. What's going on in college campuses is people making all sorts of truth claims about things like race and gender, right? I'm black, therefore I will always be this, that, and the other thing. You're white, therefore you are this, that, and the other thing no matter what, right? Mm-hmm. That is actually old, modernist, scientific racist thinking. That's what these old racist, geneticists, eugenicists thought back in the day. It's amazing. Again, SJWs are actually really, really conservative and ultimately racist. At the bottom
Social justice warriors, folks.
Right, yeah, I thought your listeners must assume that was a shorthand to use. So, postmodernism. This is where Jordan Peterson makes me want to like throw chairs when he talks about this. Comes out of French philosophy in the 1960s and 70s and 80s. Michel Foucault is the most famous example of a French postmodernist. And they get dumped on all the time. But the central argument that was made by Foucault and postmodernists was that none of these things are biologically determined, that there is no natural essence to anything, that everything is a social construct, which means that we now are free to choose our own destiny as individuals. Right? Prior to the 1960s and 70s, it was the dominant belief that if you were born a woman, you were going to be a wife and a mother. And if you weren't, you were doing something unnatural, right? That if you were black, you could never be the head of a business or the president, right? You could never do math, whatever. If you were white, you should do all those things, right? Everybody's destiny was determined at birth. And everyone believed that. Most people believed that.
Okay.
So postmodernists came along and said, guess what? You know what we found looking at history? We found just what I said. I just gave you the whole postmodern argument right there. We looked at history and we saw, first of all, that all these categories have changed over time, which tells us that they're just inventions. They're just inventions. They get reinvented all the time, okay? And second of all, they have served the purposes of ruling elites because they get to put people in their boxes and control them more easily, right? Oh, those people over there, those are black, therefore they should be our slaves. So it's okay for us to have them as slaves. Those women over there, we don't want them, working for NASA, so we will have a rule against women working for NASA, whatever it is, right? So postmodernists said, none of this is biological, none of this is inevitable. You are now free to do what you want as an individual. It was a liberating moment. It has become the dominant way of thinking in academia. And I have to say, in my view, it is the supreme achievement of academics ever.
That's it?
That's it. It's huge. Huge. So if you think about it, look how the world has changed, and particularly in the United States since then, right? We no longer generally have those ideas, or at least we don't operate as such. So black people are allowed, mostly, into places they weren't before. Women are allowed very much so into places they weren't allowed before. The whole world has changed, and I think principally from that idea. So that doesn't mean, now the problem is that these social justice warriors, so-called, on campuses, have used some of that language and taken a shit on it. So the trans movement, for instance, right, that started from postmodernism. That whole idea, right, is that, if you were born with a penis, you're a man and you should do X, Y, and Z with your life, right? The trans movement needed postmodernism to make that intervention and say, no, that's not true, right? You can actually be a woman because woman is an invention. It's a social construct. What much of the trans movement now is doing, which makes me so sad, is that they're saying that I am biologically, essentially, naturally, in my core, a woman. No one is. No one is. You can't, the whole point of this movement used to be that you get to choose your gender or choose not to be a gender. You get to move around. Your destiny is not determined for you. What a lot of the trans movement now is doing, is a good word, reifying. They're making these ideas, these abstractions real again. They're making these claims that are similar to Sam Harris's claims and to old racist claims and to old sexist claims, that if you're born a particular way biologically, this is who you are. Right? Because you've heard a lot of trans people say this, right? I was born a woman. That's what they often say.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is, no one was born anything.
What? You are losing me in a huge.
Why?
You don't think that some women are born women and some? You don't think you're born a man?
No.
What are you born? Why are you a man?
For all sorts of reasons.
For all reasons.
Yeah.
None of them being
Well,
biological, being the XY chromosome. None of them being you have testicles. None of them being you have a penis. None of them being the fact that you generally gravitate towards male activities like boxing, kickboxing, aggressive things.
We just went the thing.
No, you didn't.
Yoel Romero and Andy Dick.
Yeah, but
are they both men?
But you're a man.
Yeah.
Broad spectrum of masculine behavior. We're talking about no one is born a man. I'm not born a man.
I'm saying that no. I think
we're getting silly.
Hold on. I think it's the category of man becomes meaningless.
Does it?
Yeah, we just did this, man.
No, we didn't. We definitely didn't do
Yoel
this.
Romero and Andy Dick are both
it's a broad category. The lines get blurry at the ends of the spectrum, and I think they cross over. The male-female lines do cross over when you get to that Kenyan and Andy Dick.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's so broad that it becomes, to me, pretty damn meaningless.
Well, the numbers are incredibly small at those crossover marks. You're talking about a very, very small percentage of the population.
Neither Andy Dick nor Yoel Romero are trans people, right?
Andy might be.
They are so different, though, physically in every way.
Okay, yeah.
But we both put them in this silly category called man. What the hell does that mean anymore?
Andy's children, he made
does that
them.
mean anymore?
He impregnated different women and got babies from them.
People called men who don't and can't.
Okay, yeah,
Can't.
but that's rare.
They were born that way, by the way.
But that's pretty rare.
Not that rare.
Oh, it's very rare.
It happens.
Most men, when they have sex with a woman and they put sperm in their body, they can make a baby.
So that's one characteristic.
But hold on a second. You're making it as if it's a common thing. When you're talking about like a small fraction of the men can't make babies. An incredibly small fraction.
So the
vast majority of males with the XY chromosome who have penises are capable of impregnating a female with an XX chromosome. I mean, and the male was born a male, the female was born a female.
Right.
So what do you mean that you aren't born a man or you aren't born a female?
Right. So there are many, many characteristics, right, that we assign to the category of man. Many of them.
Okay.
That's one characteristic. Okay. So why is that characteristic in the man category? If, in particular, that there are some men who don't share that characteristic.
But which ones don't? That's aberration. The aberration is the ones that don't.
Why is it an aberration? See, these are all
because they can't get a woman pregnant. They don't produce sperm. You're talking about like very, very rare cases.
Yeah, for race, same thing happens with sickle cell anemia, right? This is what everybody invokes when they want to claim that race is real. Only black people get sickle cell anemia. Well, guess what? The numbers there are about the same as the number of men who are infertile. Why then are people with sickle cell anemia definitely black? Why is that definitely a black thing? Same thing. It's, again, why are we, there's all these characteristics. Why do we draw this line called man around all those different people?
Well, why do we do it with animals? When you have a dog and a female dog, isn't there a male dog and a female dog? You don't believe there's a male dog and a female dog?
I'm just saying it's inventions. Now, hold on. So before you get...
But it's not an invention.
Yeah, no, it is, of course.
But it's not an invention. One of them has a penis and testicles. It's a male.
The thing we see, we call it a penis. Sure, I get it. No, I get it. And that's the world I live in, absolutely. So I operate in this way, by the way. So if
dog penis?
You and I would agree on all the things in the world that are dogs.
Right.
And all the things, okay, I'm not going to walk around and be like, oh no, Joe, that's not a dog.
So with humans, you're making a distinction that there are certain feelings and the way you interface with the world that may be more or less masculine or feminine.
No, but it does apply to dogs, my point here, which is that we did draw a line, right? In those, do all dogs look alike? My God, there's a huge variation there.
We're not talking about race, though. We're talking about gender, right?
Either way, it doesn't matter. It's
let's just
same principle.
Say Dobermans. Male Dobermans and female Dobermans, right? You can't, if you go to buy a male Doberman and the guy gives you a female Doberman, he goes, oh, but she identifies as being a male. It's just an invention, man. This is a male. But she's a male. You can't disrespect her by saying she's not a male. You would say that guy's crazy and you want your money back.
Are there any two feet who are identical?
2 feet what?
Anything.
I mean, you have a really good breeder, you can get pretty goddamn close if you're talking about dogs.
No. There are no two organisms that are identical. Certainly not.
They're not
Certainly
dangled
not
down to the hair.
Yeah,
No, you got me on
well,
a technicality, but
so
you can still
then-
categorize them as XY
Sure.
or XX chromosomes.
Sure.
No?
And I'm not saying we shouldn't categorize anything ever, because we must do that to live in this world.
What are you saying?
What I am saying is we should probably stop applying certain categories to human beings in the ways we have done.
Like how so?
Because there
how
are
so
certain
with male and female?
certain inventions, certain social constructs that do nothing but bad things, that do no good, and they're only social constructs, like race and gender.
Well, tell me how gender definition.
I'm not worried
how
about Dobermans
especially
too much.
gender definition. Let's look at gender definition and tell me how it's only bad. Why is it only bad to define men as men?
Well, if you say it's about making the biological claim, the biological connection there.
Well, making a definition, saying a guy who is born a guy who gravitates towards male activities, likes females, all those things, by saying that that's a man, that this is a born man, and you're saying no one is.
So if those characteristics are naturally determined, then all of us guys who don't do those things are unnatural.
Which
The things
to
that,
women,
whatever it is that you characterize as male, right?
But that's so common with males.
What is?
Being attracted to women,
Oh, really?
and getting
Oh, really?
sex with women.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Have you heard of gay people?
Yes, it's a small percentage
you
of the
mean?
population of men. Is it 1%? Is it 10%?
Yeah,
1 out of
guess.
10?
It's certainly a lot of people, isn't it?
Well, it's a lot of people when you think of 350 million people we have living in America. Sure.
Take all the do this. Take all the men who are straight up homosexual, always
Right,
have
but
been.
that's,
Hold on.
but
wait.
you can classify them as gay men.
I know. So just take that, whatever that is.
Okay.
If it's 1 or 2 or 5 or 10%, whatever it is. Only been homosexual 100%, never been attracted to a woman, period. Okay. Okay, fine. That's still a really significant number. I'm not done. Hang on. Then take the men who don't identify as homosexual, have had sex with women, have been attracted to women, but have fucked men.
Prisoners.
A big number there. Pretty damn. Oh.
Wait a minute. How many guys do you think that are
Pretty
attracted to women
big.
but still fuck men?
So Kinsey, the Kinsey study
Sure.
in the 1940s and 50s, found that it was, I think, 30%.
What?
Yes.
30% of men fuck men?
Reached orgasm in a sexual experience with another man. Yes.
30%.
Yes. Yes. It was a very large number.
Kinsey hanging out with freaks.
Yeah. For women and men, but they were both very significant percentages. Very, not majority, very significant percentages.
Well, I don't know. what to
I've
say to that.
personally known many men who you would consider straight, who identify as straight, who have done something with men. Either given them a blowjob, gotten a blowjob, had full-on sex,
Holla.
jerked each other off.
Jesus,
Why is this news to you?
Well, it's news in that even if they did do that, you're talking about individual sexual acts between people who are male or female, right? You're still talking about a man. Still talking about a man that's having sex with other men. You're defining it in that way. You're literally saying
No.
a guy.
You are.
You are saying guys who've sucked other guys' dicks. A guy who's
Right.
done it to a guy.
No, yeah.
You're saying a man do it to a man.
Gotcha. I gotcha. No, I'm saying that people who are identified as men
You didn't
by
say that, though,
society,
did
but that's
you?
what I meant. People who are identified as men by society have done these things that society
when they
considers
were-
to be unnatural for men.
But when they're doing that, weren't they a man doing it to a man?
And look into those guys historically. Not so much recently, but still today, but certainly historically.
Listen, we can't keep going back to plus years from
I'm
now.
talking
Let's
about-
talk about like right now.
I am.
You're still talking about a man who's having a sexual exchange with another man.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can be sexually attracted to another man. It doesn't mean that you're both not men.
So do you think homosexual men are men?
Sure.
Why?
Because they're male. They have a penis. They have XY chromosomes.
So
they can get a woman pregnant if they wanted to.
Okay,
they
so-
can donate their sperm to their lesbian pals, and they can all
So
have
then you
babies
just
together.
eliminate one of the characteristics that you previously said was male.
No,
which is
no,
attraction
no,
to
no.
women.
Most men,
Mm-hmm.
are attracted to women, but a good percentage of them are gay. This is not like complicated stuff. They're still men.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where to go from here. I mean, I think I've made the argument. It's funny because I thought you were totally with me for like an hour and a half, and now it's like I feel like you're not there. And I don't know what
Definitely
to
not there with
say.
that. I think there's a giant spectrum of people, but to say that a guy isn't born a man or a woman isn't born a woman, I think is disingenuous.
Yeah, it's where so okay, Thailand, I think in India, and I think there's several Polynesian countries. There's several countries where there is a legal and cultural and social category that is neither man nor woman, nor male nor female. Like in Thailand, the lady boys, right? And there's other countries too have this. You can look it up. It's easy to find, right? Okay, you know about this maybe.
Sure.
Okay. What about that? What about those
There's
people?
that too.
What do you? Oh, wait.
I think there's two.
So,
We're saying people can be born a man,
but if
people can be born a woman, or you can get these Andy Dick, Yoel Romero weird variations.
But Joe, take the lady boys from Thailand,
okay,
and move them here to this country now. How will they be considered?
What do you mean? How will they be considered?
Americans don't have those categories.
Okay.
We have only two.
Don't you think there's a lot of variables in land also that you're dealing with, like really young sex workers? There's a lot of weird shit that goes on in Thailand, a lot of abuse.
So is the lady category real or not?
It's certainly real. As is the trans category is real.
So there they can set real, and here we do not.
But if a trans category is real, and I think you agree it's real, and I agree it's real, right? Trans people, I mean, there's absolutely people that feel like they're born in the wrong gender.
Well,
why isn't a man real? Why isn't a woman real?
Oh, okay.
They're real too.
If you want, they're all equally real. I'm down.
Yes,
I'm there. We're good.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. It's just that those categories have no absolute, biological meaning. There's not meaning that they're fluid. They're basically arbitrary. Sorry, I mean that we invent them. I'm not saying it's useless. I'm not saying we should never have any categories. I'm just saying that those categories have changed, and they change.
But you kind of say
where
that, though.
you are
That's
in the
why
world.
I'm disagreeing with you. Kind of did say that a man isn't born a man, and that a woman isn't born a woman, and for sure a lot of them are. For sure, a lot of people that have your stereotypical classic female characteristics were born female. And for sure, there's a lot of men who have classic stereotypical male behavior and patterns and desires. They're born men.
Yes,
and then there's trans people. And then there's asexual people that also need to be considered. There's people that just don't have any desire to fuck anybody.
Okay.
They don't want to. They don't want to be a man or a woman. They can call themselves queer. They can call themselves whatever they want. They don't want to be a female. They don't want to be a male. They just want to be human.
Here's the deal. Let's make a deal. If that's what you have to say about it, and you want to not get in the way of people doing those things and making those decisions for themselves and let them do what they want to do, I am totally with you. And that's true.
For sure, I don't want to get in the way of anybody making... I don't want to get in the way of furries.
That's awesome.
If you identify with being a giant squirrel...
That's awesome. That's great. And that's really the matters. I'm just saying that claims, and I want to end it here, claims about these essential characteristics that it's biologically determined, right, are the things that reinforce getting in the way. Laws, policies, cultures, ideas, norms that get in the way of people doing what they want to do with their own lives. Right? Because do you see what I mean?
For sure with some people. Well, the variables are so green, and the spectrum is so broad.
So after I was on your first time, got a whole bunch of comments from people calling me a fag and a pussy and a sissy and a this and that.
You can't read those. Why are you reading those?
Feminizing me, and it's not your fault for calling me a girl.
But you can't read those.
Oh, no, I know. It's whatever. No, I mean, came to Twitter and whatever.
Yeah, you don't...
Oh, no, I know. I stopped. I learned, right? Oh, yeah. I don't do it anymore. It didn't matter. I didn't care. This didn't bother me at all. I just thought it was interesting, actually.
Okay.
Right? So in other words, and a lot of what they were really saying, and some of them elaborated on this, was that I was, not really man enough. Right? I was less of a man for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't care. It's fine. I liked it. It was funny. But it really proves my point, is that, these things are very fluid. So they kind of were kicking me out of the category of man. And I was like, cool. Please.
I think they were just insulting you to try to get a rise from them. I think you could make a rational argument dealing with internet trolls.
No, of course not. I'm saying it's just one example of what on generally, which is that we do this all the time, right?
Yeah, but they're not even human. When someone's interacting with you like that, it's lacking all of the characteristics of human interaction. You're not there with a person. You're not looking at them. If someone was in front of you like that, oh, you're a fag, you'd be like, oh my God, I'm in danger. This is a crazy person.
Oh, yeah.
I might have to defend myself against this person. Because if someone is treating me that way, insulting me, looking me in the eye, we're so close to violence. Like anything can happen here. Like this is a person that's not rational.
It is amazing, isn't it?
Do you think that the Scandinavian model that has revealed that when you do make things more equal, you will find that people generally tend to gravitate more towards traditional gender roles? Do you think that this makes people happier? Has it been observed that this is a happier result?
That's a good question. The indices of life satisfaction are pretty high in Scandinavia, but I don't know if anybody has done an analysis that would indicate whether the sexual sorting is a contributor to that. That's a good question. I mean, the general idea has been that the Scandinavians are happier because their societies are more egalitarian. But they're not more egalitarian in the sense that men and women are also more different. So
men and women are more different, but opportunities are more egalitarian.
Yeah. So then the societies are more satisfied. But it's tough, because there's other variables, because the Scandinavian countries are relatively homogenous, right? And more homogenous societies tend to be more peaceful and happier, not more diverse societies. And they're also small countries, so they're somewhat easier to govern.
Right.
And they tend to be wealthy. So it'd be hard to parse out all those contributors, right, to figure out what it is that's making the Scandinavians relatively content.
This is like a super tribe versus a country.
Yeah, right. And those sorts of societies, in some sense, are easier to manage.
Is there benefit to this model that we could perhaps bring to the United States or to Canada and maybe mitigate some of the issues that we have between the right and the left? Like maybe there's some sort of a compromise that'll lead to a less debate and dispute.
Well, I think you guys in the States are doing real well, actually, personally. I mean, you know, your system of checks and balances seems to work out pretty well. There's a fair bit of, let's say, left domination right now of the mainstream media. I think that's a reasonable claim. And also of academia and of the intelligentsia. But the political system is skewed pretty hard to the Republican end of things at the moment. And so that's not a bad balance. And then in the last election, I mean, maybe you could make a case, perhaps, that things had tilted a little too far to the Republican side, but that got balanced out because the Democrats took the House, and it seems like they were more moderate Democrats. That seems to be the scuttlebutt. So, you know, it isn't obvious to me that your system isn't functioning well. I think that one of the things that's happening that's making things look more contentious than they are is that the mainstream media is under such assault by the up-and-coming media forms, including people like you, as their financial models deteriorate and as their journalistic standards take a hit and as they lose their fact-checkers and their time to be careful with the stories, they concentrate more on exaggerating the extremes to attract attention. And so, you know, there was an article published in the Atlantic Monthly about a month ago showing that, and it depends on how you calculate these things, but that the radical leftists and the radical right-wingers are only about 5% of the population on each side. And that the vast majority of Americans consider themselves something approximating the relatively silent majority. And so I don't think that things are polarized as badly as they seem. And it is also the case right now that if you poll people and ask them about the conditions of their life in the United States, they tend to say that they're doing quite well, but that people aren't. And so I think maybe, I don't know this for sure, but I think maybe that the technological pressure that's being put on the mainstream media is driving extreme political views as a means of gathering the attention of a shrinking market share.
That's an interesting take on it, and I wonder how detrimental that is to us as a whole, because we are constantly dealing with this clickbait nonsense headline, you know, and everything is a dispute, everything's a war.
Well, it's nerve-wracking.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I noticed this years ago because I really stopped watching the news 25 years ago, although I've been heavily involved in it the last 2 years, because I noticed that most of what passed for news wasn't. Because my sense, well, if it isn't important a month from now, it was never important. And almost everything that's news is like important right now.
Yeah.
And so I tried to stay away from that. It was better for my peace of mind. And I often recommended to my clinical clients who were depressed and anxious that they shield themselves from the news as much as possible. But now the news is everywhere, right? It's everywhere. It's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's YouTube. It's like we're just inundated by it. It's like CNN on steroids. It's 24-hour news cycle, and it's produced by everyone, whether they're informed or not, and it's really high emotion, and I think that is making things look a lot worse to us than they actually are. I was there I went to Stockholm twice and Oslo twice and Helsinki twice and Copenhagen once in the last month. And I spent quite a bit of, there was a lot of interviews, a lot of discussion about the so-called gender paradox. And that's a very interesting thing because it's really put their tails not in Scandinavia. And it makes sense because the Scandinavians are going to have to deal with this first because they've gone the farthest down the road for like making their society gender equal.
But explain that.
Yeah,
They don't,
I will. Okay. So imagine first that there's two kinds of equality that you might pursue: equality of opportunity, and so that would mean there's wide range of talent across people, regardless of their whatever that might be: sex, gender, race, ethnicity. There's talent distributed everywhere, and it's a truism of the West in the deepest sense that each of the individuals within those groups should be in a position where their talents they're encouraged to manifest. Would be good for them spiritually and psychologically, but also because that would be of benefit to the community, right? I mean, talent's rare, which people don't understand. There's lots of different kinds of talent, but in each domain and so it's to everyone's benefit to exploit talented people to maximal possible degree. So even if you're just selfish, you'd want to push for equality of opportunity because the more talented people there are out there, the more cool stuff you get to have, and hopefully the more diverse and interesting you pursue equality of opportunity. And the Scandinavians have done that, especially trying to knock down barriers in the workplace. And by all accounts, by all standard theories, the Scandinavian countries, places like the Netherlands, to a lesser degree, have gone further than any other countries in pursuing those policies. Okay, and part of the consequence of that is that some of the differences between men and women have been minimized in the workplace than there were 40 years ago. And in many occupations, there's actually dominance by women. There's dominance in the university fields. And so women have poured into the workplace. And hypothetically, there's problems with that because it's put a lot of stress on family structure. But hypothetically, because it gives people a broader range of choices and it gives everyone access to more. So, and then also if you're around the world, you see that one of the best predictors of the probability of economic development in developing countries is the attitude in those countries towards equal rights for all. The more positively the country is predisposed to female, the more likely they are to develop economically. And maybe that's because that indicates that they're open to new ideas or something like that, or open to transformation. So that's one kind of equality. Open up the playing field so that everybody has a chance to compete and cooperate and land where they will. But then the other kind of equality is equality of outcome. And that's often described as equity in today's language. And so the ultimate equity, take every job, every conceivable kind of job, and stratify that by every conceivable level of authority within every job. And then ensure that every single category of person is represented precise proportion to their prevalence in the population. So every job should be 50% and 50% men and say 18% non-Western ethnic minority and whatever that happens to be. And then you could break that down. And otherwise there's evidence of systemic prejudice. Okay, now, first thing to say, and the reason it's impossible is because there's no limit number of ways that you can categorize people into groups. So you know about sex and ethnicity and race, maybe those are the obvious ones, but then you have gender, and then you have ethnicity and intelligence and temperament and height and socioeconomic background. And I mean, let's say there's 20, but there's a lot more than that. There's no possible way that you could regulate a society so that every single one of those groups was equally represented in every single one of those level of the hierarchy. That is
so they
impossible.
Want to come to the significant ones, which are men and women and race.
Well, yeah. Who's to say those are the significant ones? That's it isn't even obvious they are, because I would say that like a more significant is cognitive ability, because that's a better predictor of long-term life success than sex or race. So I don't even think that we've necessarily identified the canonical groups. We've just decided that gender are maybe they're the most obvious.
Right, but isn't there a problem is that people don't. What they don't do is they don't take in terms of cognitive ability. They don't get on a team. They don't get on there's people that are sexist.
Yeah.
But it's very rare that someone is elitist in terms of their cognitive ability.
Well, say, Joe, I mean, I think one of the reasons that...
elitist, prejudiced is a better word.
I don't know. I mean, you could be, but look, I think one of the reasons that, like, here's something that's kind of peculiar.
It doesn't even make sense now thinking about it. Of course they are.
Well, there's one thing that's quite peculiar about the United States in that regard, is like most working class people, let's say, are far more irritated with the intellectual elite than they are with the wealth. And that's because they think they could become wealthy. And they could. But they don't think they could become part of the intellectual elite. And it is obvious to me that the intellectual elite, so those would be the liberal left-leaning types who dominate the media and academia, are particularly positive in their attitudes towards the typical working class person. I think they're prejudiced and elitist. I do believe that that's the case. And I think they're also, what would you call it, patronizing. And I think that the typical working class person, say, who voted for Trump is very, very sensitive to that. And so they're much more concerned with the 1% who are the cognitive elite than they are the 1% who are the economic elite, because at least they think that's a game they could play. So anyways.
But isn't that all because there's caricatures, right, of the 1% of the economic elite? You just think of people that are in these lofty positions that are in control of the financial institutions, but the 1% of the intellectual elite you think of in terms of like some of the more preposterous things you're hearing out of universities now and safe spaces and
there's that too.
Yeah.
And that too.
There's
no appreciation on the part of the intellectual elite for the pathologies of there's nothing stupider than a smart person who went wrong. You know, like you can tank on. I've seen this in my clients, you know, frequently. Like if I have a particularly smart client who's particularly disordered in their personality, that's often just that's so difficult. It's almost unimaginable because they're so good at analyzing, for example.
What is your approach to handling something like that? Who's super intelligent, but yet completely their life is in disarray?
You know, I usually take a very practical approach. Like, you know, we try to identify in my therapy practice. I always start with behavioral principles. It's like, okay, well, let's see if we can identify a few areas through negotiation that are really causing you grief and misery. You know, what's wrong with your life as far as you're concerned? Of discussion, and then we might try to figure out what's causing that. And often very difficult to figure out too, because it might be something physical. You know, you might be sick in some way because depression is autoimmune related, and anxiety can be a side effect of all sorts of physiological disorders, or eating improperly, or sleeping badly, or not exercising, you know, enough to kind of keep yourself regulated. So you try to figure out what's causing it, and then you try to sketch out some possible solution that we could both test. And then with the more intelligent ones, you know, then they can come up with all sorts of reasons why none of this is going to work. Or 1,000 reasons why, usually 1,000 reasons why none of it's going to work. And with like that, sometimes it's useful to turn to dreams if they dream. Because one of the things that's cool about dreams, even though they're hard to interpret, they never lie. And so sometimes you can take someone who's hyper-rational and they'll have a dream and they'll tell you the dream. And then you can work through an interpretation, which is a tricky business. And the dream will tell them something and there's no denying it. It's like, well, it's a statement from nature. So what do? You're going to pretend that that's not the case? You know, so that's often extremely useful. So back to the equality issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's what's happened. So psychologists have, and this is what's putting a tail, not in the tail of the Scandinavians, psychologists have come to a pretty decent agreement about standard personality model, right? So there's extroversion, neuroticism, agreeableness, openness, and conscientiousness. And they look fairly stable cross-culturally. And it was all done by asking thousands of people hundreds and hundreds of questions and then grouping them statistically. So it was atheoretical, basically. Took computational power and statistics to find out that these are how traits group. So inextroverted people are sociable and happy, and neurotic people experience a fair bit of negative emotion. So that's the positive emotion dimensions. Agreeable people are maternal, and disagreeable people are competitive, and there's a fair bit of male-female difference there. Conscientious people are dutiful and industrious and orderly, and the open people are creative. And so those are your basic 5 dimensions. Everyone more or less agrees on it. Maybe there's 7 dimensions, and we've got a questionnaire that breaks the 5 into 10. That's called Understand Myself. But basically, there's good consensus on the 5. Okay, so now as soon as you have the 5 basic traits, you can ask some questions. And so what you do is give the questionnaire, you can either fill it out yourself or have other people fill it out on your behalf. So it could be a teacher, could be a parent, and that's all being done. And what you find is there are dramatic differences between men and women. And the biggest difference is that women experience more negative emotion and that they're more agreeable than men. So, and that's borne out by psychiatric evidence because higher levels of negative emotion are manifested in depression and anxiety, and women are diagnosed with higher levels of depression and anxiety all around the world. And with agreeableness, that's also borne out by the medical literature in some sense, the medical literature, socio-medical literature, because disagreeable people are more likely to be incarcerated, because that's the best predictor of being incarcerated, even though it's not a very good predictor, and men are incarcerated at about a 10-to-1 rate compared to women and are more likely to be antisocial and disordered. So the personality differences are mirrored in socio-medical literature. Okay, so there are differences, but then there's a question. Are those differences a consequence of socialization or are they biological? And the answer to that is tricky because how much something is social and how much it is biological actually depends on the social circumstances. So, here's an example. If you have a society where no one has enough to eat and people are starving, then there's a huge cultural effect on people's intelligence, let's say, that's mediated by economic factors. It's got a biological origin, right? The starvation. So the relationship between biology and culture is actually partly culturally dependent, so it makes it complicated. But in any case, here's how the scientists decided to address. They thought, well, why don't we rank order countries by how egalitarian their policies are, which you can do. You have reliability. You put the countries where women are second-class citizens at the bottom, put the Scandinavian countries at the top, get good reliability across raters for how you'd rate those countries, and then look at the magnitude of the differences between men and women by the egalitarian social policies. And so then you'll find out in the hypotheses, if the differences between men and women are pretty social, then as cultures become more egalitarian, men and women will become more alike. That's happened. The opposite happened. Egalitarian the society, and it turns out the richer the society, because that's all discovered now, the more different men and women become. And so the differences are not huge. So with agreeableness, for example, if you took the average man, a typical man and a typical woman out of the population, just randomly, and you had bet that the woman was more aggressive than the man, you'd be wrong 60% of the time. It's quite a bit of overlap, right? Because you'd be right 40% of the time. But the problem is a lot of selection takes place at the extremes. Maybe you're only concerned about disagreeable people when they're violent, and maybe it's only the 1 in 50 most disagreeable person who's violent, and they're all men. So you have quite a bit of similarity at the average and big differences at the extremes. And the extremes is where people do things like employment selection. So the biggest difference that's been discovered between men and women, and this is the one that gets big in the Scandinavian countries, is interest. Men are more interested and women are more interested in people. And it's a big difference. It's one full standard deviation. So what that means is that if you were a man, you would have to be more interested in people than 85% of men to be as interested in people as the 50th percentile woman. And you'd have to be more interested in things than 85% of women to be interested in things as the typical man.
And how do you things? Objects?
Gadgets.
Okay.
Gadgets.
Oh,
things.
okay.
Non-animate things.
Car.
Yeah. Tools.
Yeah.
Technology.
Right.
STEM. Because the other thing that's happened is that the more egalitarian the society, the fewer women go into the STEM fields. The fewer.
That's interesting.
Okay, so now this unravels in a way. It's like this is a hugely relevant issue politically, because it means that you cannot have equality of opportunity and equality of outcome at the same. It's not possible. As you make your society more egalitarian and you open up the opportunity for equality of outcome, you increase how different men and women are, and that changes their occupational choice. So if men are more interested in things, which they are by a substantial, then way more of them are going to be engineers.
Wouldn't possibly support this idea that an enforced model of equality would allow people to be themselves more? I mean, this is almost what you're saying.
Well,
because
that is the optimistic view. It's so funny because the Swedish foreign minister told me to go climb back under the rock that I came out from when I was in Scandinavia, because I was describing this science.
I read that, but I'm not sure why.
Well, she regards me as misogynist because I think that because I've been putting forward the evidence that there are genuine differences between men and women.
But she's held accountable for that, because that's just a flippant thing to say. Like you should have, especially in a position of power like she's in, you should have a very specific argument. Saying for a leader to have such a base thing to say, such a crude, dumb thing to say, crawl back under the rock that you came from.
Yeah, well, I thought she was making a joke about lobsters, but I don't think she was.
Lobsters go under rocks? I guess they do. They're growing cracks.
Yeah, and the lobsters have better rocks.
That's a very interesting thing in the GQ thing, where the woman was challenging you on your neurobiology, your neurochemistry, your understanding.
Yes. Well, hardly any psychologists understand that serotonin is associated with hierarchies, like a truism. It's been known for 30 years. So
we can definitely get that, but I'm very curious about this, because this idea of enforced equality, right? Ensuring that there is such a high emphasis placed on equality, that you have the equal amount of men and the equal amount of women, and the opportunities are absolutely available as much to women as they are to men. This is enforced. That this creates an environment where there's less resistance. Now, an environment where there's less resistance, perhaps women don't feel as compelled to say, "I'll show you."
Yeah, that is what seems to happen.
This is
here's an example. So there are fewer women mathematicians in the higher echelons, but here's something interesting about mathematical ability. First of all, it's very rare, so that's the thing to keep in mind. Now, if you look in junior high, that mathematically gifted and males and females are approximately as common. Now, there's a little bit of debate about that, because there is some evidence that maybe at the very extremes there's a male advantage, just like there's a male disadvantage at the end, because the male distribution for intelligence might be flatter. And so that's the greater male variability hypothesis. There's been papers putting that forward that are retracted as a consequence of pressure from politically correct people, even though greater male variability is actually quite common in the animal kingdom for a variety of reasons. Men are more endable, that males are more expensive in some ways, or you could say that males are likely to pursue high risk, high return strategies. You can look at it either way, and it's certainly possible. In any case, the males in junior high who happen to be mathematically are less likely to also be verbally gifted. That doesn't seem to be the case for the females. Math nerd, then math is a pretty logical pathway for you, because you don't have as many other options. Whereas if female math nerd, you have other options, because you're more likely to also verbally gifted. And so that's at least in principle, account for some of the reason why there are fewer mathematicians than men mathematicians.
They have other options.
They have other options. And there's lots of this. And so we have this reflexive idea, and this is very much the case, because this is like the core idea among the feminist neo-Marxist types, is that if there's differences in outcome, that's proof of prejudice, and that's support for the idea of the patriarchal tyranny. And that's like the core axiom. The radical left is the patriarchal tyranny, as far as I'm concerned. That's God for them, the patriarchal tyranny. It's like, well, it turns out that many of these differences in outcome between men and women are a consequence of the patriarchal tyranny. In fact, even get bigger when you reduce the tyrannical aspect of the patriarch and even the patriarchal aspect to it. Then it makes that theory not only wrong, but opposite of the truth, which is this kind of wrong. And so, if more likely to pursue careers in the STEM fields, which seems to be the case, under conditions of optimal freedom for men and women, then going to drive income disparities, because the STEM fields pay, because they're scalable. Like, it's really hard to scale care. Like, if you work in a daycare, you're going to care for 3 infants. You're not going to care for 50, because you can't. It's not scalable. But if you're a software designer, it's infinitely scalable. And so there's a much wider range of possibility for generating much larger income pool, much larger pools of wealth. And men are also more likely to work longer hours. And if you work 10% longer hours, you make 40% money. There's a nonlinear return on. That's a good thing. If you have a job, you want to be the guy or the woman who's working that 10%, because the return on that is nonlinear. So that's a useful thing to know. Men are more likely to work outside. They're more likely to work in businesses. They're more likely to run time businesses rather than part-time businesses, and they're more likely to move in pursuit of their career goals. And that all contributes to differences in among Uber drivers there because they drive faster. So anyways.
That's good though.
Well, no, but it's a high risk. It's a high risk pattern issue, right?
It's a pattern male.
It's more risk. There's more risk in it.
Yes.
So there's turn as long as you don't get hurt.
Right.
And that's a pretty common male pattern. Is there's more risk. There's more as long as you don't get hurt.
The problem seems to be when discussing these things in any way romanticizing or glorifying male behavior or putting any emphasis whatsoever on there being a positive aspect to a lot of the things that we think of as being negative, like aggression or ambition or competition. And
well,
competition amongst men is fine. Yeah. Competition with men against women is often thought of as cruel.
Yes. Well, and there's a certain amount of reason for that as well, because obviously physical competition it's easy to border on cruel.
This is why we were talking before the show that instead of calling people men and women when referring to because there's this very disturbing, in my opinion, trend of transgender women entering into these competitions now with women who are biologically female and dominating them. Yeah. And that instead of calling people men and women, let's dispense with that.
Yeah, you can be a man or a woman.
Just say
man or a woman, that's your choice, and you can change it whenever you want. So you're a man or a woman, and that choice. But we have a new rule, which is that if you have XY chromosome, so you're an XY person or an XX person, then if you're an XY person, you don't get to engage in physical combat with an X person.
Yes.
Men or
with
woman.
An XX person.
Doesn't matter.
Yes.
Yeah. How would that be?
If you're XY, can't engage in physical combat with XX.
That's right.
Yes.
Ys cannot hit XXs. How that? And maybe they can't run in contests against them, and maybe they can't play tennis against them. Not within, maybe that's just reasonable.